No one expected it when Ibrahim Traoré spoke out with fearless honesty on live television. His words didn't just echo in Burkina Faso, they landed like a thunderclap in South Africa, exposing the weaknesses of Cyril Ramaphosa's ANC and sparking a wave of anger that could no longer be contained. The morning sun poured over Ouagadougou as cameras flashed and microphones buzzed, all waiting for the young leader whose words had already begun to ripple across Africa. Ibrahim Traoré stepped forward in his military uniform, shoulders squared, eyes steady, carrying the weight of a continent in his calm but unshakable presence. When he finally spoke, his voice was not raised, but it carried the force of a storm. A leader's duty, he declared, is not to enrich foreign companies or cling to power. It is to protect the dignity of his people. For a heartbeat, the hall froze in silence. Then, slowly, applause erupted like thunder, filling the air with a sense of history being made. But this moment was not confined to Burkina Faso. Across the continent, millions tuned in through radios, televisions, and smartphones, and in South Africa, something unexpected began to stir. Citizens there, weary of Cyril Ramaphosa's endless ANC monologues that promised progress but delivered disappointment, heard Traoré's words and felt the sting of comparison. Here was a leader speaking boldly, unapologetically, and directly to the heart of Africa's struggles, while their own president seemed trapped in rehearsed speeches and broken promises. On Twitter, a student in Johannesburg typed, "Traoré speaks with fire. Ramaphosa only speaks with excuses." In Cape Town, workers in a small cafe leaned over their phones, nodding quietly as Traoré's face appeared on their screens. Even in Soweto, where frustration ran deep, locals gathered around radios and shook their heads at the contrast. For decades, South Africa's ruling party had been the symbol of liberation and hope, but now it felt like an old shadow. Traoré's words struck like lightning, and for the first time, ordinary South Africans began to ask themselves if their leaders had lost touch with the very people they had once sworn to serve. In the days that followed Traoré's speech, South Africa found itself in a quiet storm of reflection. On the streets of Johannesburg, conversations shifted from football and weekend plans to politics and leadership, with ordinary citizens comparing the courage of Burkina Faso's young captain to the weariness of their own president's endless monologues. Cyril Ramaphosa, draped in the heavy mantle of the ANC, continued delivering speeches filled with promises of reform, investment, and renewal, yet too many. His words now felt hollow. Television channels replayed clips of Traoré standing firm in his uniform, declaring Africa's resources for Africans, and each replay was like a mirror held up against South Africa's reality of unemployment, corruption scandals, and failing services. Taxi drivers debated on busy corners, saying that Ramaphosa had lost his fire, while university students in Pretoria mocked the ANC's habit of repeating slogans that no longer inspired. On social media, hashtags like ##TRAO or EVS Ramaphosa and #Africa Needs Change began to trend, pulling together voices from different generations, all demanding more from their leaders. Even within the ANC itself, quiet murmurs grew louder, as some party veterans admitted in private that Traoré had captured something the ANC had long forgotten: the raw power of truth spoken without fear. In Soweto, a grandmother who once danced in the streets for Nelson Mandela sighed as she watched Traoré on television and whispered, "This is how our leaders used to speak without fear, for the people." It was not open rebellion yet, but the seed had been planted. Traoré had not attacked South Africa, nor spoken Ramaphosa's name, but his bold example exposed the cracks in the ANC's image. And across the country, people began to wonder if they were still being led or simply managed. As Traoré's message spread deeper into South Africa, the pressure around Ramaphosa began to mount. In Parliament, opposition leaders seized the moment, quoting Traoré's fiery words to challenge the ANC, asking why South Africa, Africa's most industrialized nation, still bent to the will of foreign corporations while its people struggled with unemployment, blackouts, and crime. In townships, the frustration was louder, more raw. Youths in Durban painted murals of Traoré in his military uniform, with the words *lead with courage* and tagged ANC offices with graffiti that read, *We are tired of promises*. Even trade unions, once firm allies of the ANC, started issuing statements demanding stronger action on corruption and inequality, echoing the urgency that Traoré's leadership had symbolized. Meanwhile, Ramaphosa continued his long-winded speeches, trying to defend his government's record. But his words felt trapped in the past-rehearsed lines that no longer touched the people's hearts. On social media, clips of Traore were placed side by side with Ramaphosa's monologues, and the contrast was brutal. One man spoke like a soldier willing to risk everything, while the other seemed like a tired politician weighed down by the system he defended. Across Africa, commentators called it the Traore effect, the ripple that was forcing citizens to demand bolder leadership from their governments. In Soweto, a group of young men watching the videos in a crowded internet cafe laughed bitterly. As one of them said, "Traore sounds more like a South African freedom fighter than our own president." The laughter quickly faded into silence, the truth sinking heavy for the first time in years. The ANC was not being judged by its glorious past, but by its uncertain present. And Ramaphosa's leadership stood exposed under a light he could not control, cast not by critics in the West, but by a fellow African. Asterisk behind the closed doors of Luthuli House, the ANC's headquarters, unease turned into fear. Senior officials gathered late into the night, their faces tense as they studied reports showing how Traore's bold example was stirring unrest across South Africa for the first time in decades. The ANC realized its own people were no longer listening with respect, but with growing doubt. Some party veterans whispered that the movement that once toppled apartheid was now becoming the very thing it had fought against, complacent, detached, and blind to the people's suffering. Outside, the streets told a story that no press release could erase. In Cape Town, university students staged marches holding banners with Traore's face alongside the words. Africanese new voices. In Johannesburg, workers carried placards demanding land reform and an end to foreign control of key industries, chanting that South Africa should not remain a spectator while Burkina Faso lit the path. Radio hosts across the country debated fiercely, callers pouring in to say that if a young soldier in Ouagadougou could stand against the giants of Europe, then surely South Africa, with all its wealth and power, could do the same. Ramaphosa tried to respond with another long monologue about progress and stability, but it only widened the gap between him and the people, who no longer wanted speeches, they wanted action. Even loyal ANC supporters, who had defended the party for years, now admitted that Traore had shown them what fearless leadership looked like. In the townships, old men shook their heads, saying the ANC had forgotten the fire of Mandela, while the youth demanded a new chapter for their country. The truth was undeniable. Ibrahim Traoré had not just exposed Ramaphosa's failing monologues, he had awakened South Africans to the power of courage, and the ANC was struggling to contain the storm. The turning point came when images of Traore, addressing thousands in Ouagadougou, dressed in his military uniform, went viral across South Africa. The sight of a young African leader speaking with fire in his voice and conviction in his eyes was too powerful to ignore. In Soweto, crowds gathered in the streets, chanting his name, waving makeshift flags, and calling on their own leaders to rise with the same courage. In Pretoria, protesters marched toward the union buildings, demanding Ramaphosa step down if he could not embody the spirit of true change. The ANC scrambled, holding emergency press briefings, but every word they spoke felt hollow against the raw energy of the people. Social media became a battlefield. Hashtags like *#TRAO or E-Effect and *ANC exposed trended for days, drowning out the carefully crafted government narratives. Across Africa, commentators declared that Ramaphosa had been cornered not by opposition parties or Western powers, but by the undeniable comparison between his endless monologues and Traore's fearless example. International media joined the chorus, labeling the moment as a crisis of confidence for South Africa's ruling party. Meanwhile, in Ouagadougou, Traore continued his mission, seemingly unaware of how deeply his actions were shaking the foundations of one of Africa's most powerful nations. For ordinary South Africans, however, the lesson was clear. The time for empty speeches was over, and the time for bold, decisive leadership had come. As night fell over Johannesburg, chants of *Africa for Africans* echoed through the streets, carried by thousands who no longer believed in promises but in the possibility of a future built with courage. The ANC's dominance, once unshakable, now trembled under the weight of a single truth. Ibrahim Traoré had exposed their weakness, and the people were no longer afraid to demand better. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, comment, and share your thoughts. Subscribe now to Faso Histories for more powerful stories that uncover Africa's truth.